So basically today I'm going to lead an activity in the interactive software Nearpod. Basically this is an interactive presentation software where you can place your presentations from either, it's easiest to do in Google Slides. You can integrate this with Microsoft apps as well. It's just a little bit more work, but I did the presentation in Google and then integrated it using the add-on for Nearpod. So basically, when you go into Nearpod, you would get this button that says Teach for the presentation that you've created. You can either choose, teachers can choose live participation, live plus Zoom, or a student-paced session, which is great because you can either utilize the tool synchronously or asynchronously. So today, instead of having all of you participate, since we don't have a lot of time, Greg, Marcia, and Sandy are going to be my students to kind of demonstrate the activities for you. And I'm just going to continue to share my screen so that you can see how the software works. Okay, so you can see I have my student list. These are the people in our presentation. There's me in my Bitmoji classroom. So I've become obsessed with Bitmoji classrooms and I made one for my presentations, but I wanted to show you in a Bitmoji classroom how you could facilitate the question formulation technique. Everything that is outlined in purple in this presentation is clickable, but since you guys are really just watching my screen, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pop into the chat the folder on our drive that has the resources and the presentation for this session. So everyone should see a link now in the chat. That chat link will take you to a folder that looks like this. It has some documents, but you're going to want to go to this one that says ELL Leadership QFT. Okay. Does anyone have any questions about how to get to the resources?
Rachel, this is Candy. There is a report of a few people in the waiting room, but I don't have access to the waiting room. Can one of you make sure you admit them, please?
Sure, no problem.
Okay.
There we go. So they should all be in now. Is it possible to make a co-host to be co-host? Because if you're co-host, then you'll be able to watch the waiting room while I present.
I can do that if you want. Candace, if that's okay, Rachel can make me a co-host and I can monitor the waiting room. It's Kathy.
The Zoom account that was used to create this meeting doesn't have the co-host option selected, so it's only host availability.
Oh, okay.
Oh, okay. All right. So I'm going to have to keep an eye on that. But my presentation is short, and then I'll look at it for whoever's presenting will have to look. Yeah, we'll figure it out. We're educators. That's what we do.
Yes.
So it looks like a lot of people are in the presentation. So if you want to look in there, you can. But I would suggest looking at my screen so you can see the Nearpod functionality. As I said, anything outlined in purple in my Bitmoji classroom is a clickable link. So if you were to encourage teachers to make something like this, they would have to come up with a mechanism so that students know what's clickable and what's not within their Bitmoji classroom. But as a true elementary person, I went crazy for the Bitmoji classroom. It's just so fun and engaging and interesting to look at. So today's objectives, we're going to demonstrate engaging remote learning strategies for ELLs and all students. I'm going to present the question formulation technique, or the QFT, through Bitmoji Classroom, Nearpod, and then I'm going to show you that it can also be done with Google Apps and other types of apps as well. Marcia is going to present remote guided reading strategies for ELLs with Pear Deck and Flipgrid. Sandy is going to demonstrate methods using hyperdocs and hyperlinks that simplify student and family access to online learning, and also demonstrate for teachers how to scaffold online tools for use with ELLs. And then Greg is going to share with you a remote learning tool that he created, which is an interactive menu made in Genially. It's an interactive infographic. So, what is the question formulation technique? When you think about virtual engagement, sometimes the word virtual jumps out first, and a lot of people have been learning to use technology, but I've been seeing in my own daughter's class, remote class, and also in some other places that I've got to see the instruction, there's been less higher order thinking and some more like rote memorization or recall questions happening in classes. So the question in my mind has really been, how do we promote higher order thinking while teaching remotely? My favorite classroom strategy happens to be the question formulation technique. I read about it a long time ago in the Harvard Education Review. And this book, then I read this book afterward, which is very thin. It's like this thick. Once you learn the strategy, you really don't need to read so much about it. The authors created this strategy so that actually parents could learn to ask better questions when they went into schools and spoke to teachers about their children. But the strategy, you know, very quickly blossomed into something that can be used by any age group in a classroom or any other setting. It's really a lifelong strategy. It really teaches students how to ask great questions and also to promote metacognition. So let's practice. Let's look at the QFT. I'm gonna put my Nearpod into student mode so you can see what students would see. I was in teacher mode just now. So this is what a lesson would look like in Nearpod. I'm using Nearpod to facilitate this QFT, but I'm going to show you that you can use other apps as well. You can really use whatever you're comfortable with. So step one of this strategy, the teacher designs a question focus, or Q focus as it's called in the strategy. So I've chosen the sun as my question focus, and I have an image there. You can have an image, you can use an audio file as your question focus. You can really use anything that's going to generate student questions and student thinking. So step two, students produce questions. These are the rules for the QFT step two. Ask as many questions as you can. Do not stop to discuss, judge, edit, or answer any question. Write down every question exactly as it was asked and change any statements into questions. So if I were doing this with a large group of students, I would move into a breakout group to have students do this step, the questioning step, together after we had modeled it on our own or as a full group so that they really knew how to do it. And the way that I would have them do that is the group scribe would keep a record of all of their questions, and then there is a Google Doc that I created where they would then place all of their questions. Now for this QFT that I would be doing in Nearpod, after they broke out into their groups, they would then, on this collaborate slide, I have to go back to teacher view to check something off. So what I have to check off is that I do not want to approve student comments before they're posted, but you can choose that in case you have, you know, kids in your group who are questionably posting things. So I do not need to approve, hopefully, you know, Greg, Sandy, and Marcia's comments today. So I'm going to ask them right now, as my group of students, can you post as many questions as you can about the sun? There are no wrong or right questions. Just make sure that you write down every question as it was asked. Now, the first time you would do this with students, you would probably want to do it as a large group and really take it step by step, especially since they may be learning a new technology at the same time. But I will show you that you can do this with different types of technology. Okay, so these are some pretty good questions. How old is the sun? And you can also post a picture in here. Thank you for demonstrating that, Marcia. So once you have a bunch of student questions in here, you move to the next step, is where students learn to categorize their questions as either open or closed. Closed-ended would be answered with a yes or a no. Is the sun hot? Yes. Is the sun far away? Yes. An open-ended question needs more explanation, is more than a one-word answer. How does the sun give off heat? That would have to be researched to be answered. So what I would do is practice with students how to categorize questions as open or closed. So these are just some sample questions that I put here. And then in Nearpod, I would do this slide, which I'm going to switch back to the student view now so you can see what students would be doing. Students are able now to draw on this slide. I converted this slide to a draw it slide, which means they can either enter text here in the slide, or they can just put an O or a C next to for open or closed. So I would ask my students now, can you please categorize these as open or closed? And we would do some together. So my first question would be, what is the sun? Is this an open or closed-ended question? And we would say that is an open-ended question, so we'd put an O next to it.
Excuse me, Rachel, would you just do one more check of the waiting room, please?
Sure, thank you for reminding me, because it's really, you know, it's really easy to forget about that
I hear you.
while you're presenting. Okay. Thank you. If you could remind me again in a few minutes, because there were quite a few people in there. Okay. All right, so once you practice categorizing questions as open or closed with your students, they can be sent off into a breakout if they're ready for that. They may not be, there's going to take a few lessons before they're ready to go into breakouts and do this together. However, when they are ready to break out, they can categorize the questions as open or closed on that same Google Doc that you may have provided them for the scribe. The scribe can then write the O's and the C's as they discuss it. And after, if I were using Nearpod to facilitate this QFT, I would then have students, after categorizing your questions, enter all of your open-ended questions here on this board. So if my students could enter a couple of their open-ended questions here. Okay, how hot is the sun is definitely open-ended. Can we get to the sun? That one is a close-ended question. However, you would have time with your students to really discuss that. Okay, what is the sun made of? So once these were all on your board and you had all of the students' open-ended questions, in Nearpod, if you decided to use Nearpod to facilitate this, you would then decide together as a group with your breakout group which 3 questions are the most important to ask. This is the prioritized question step. So students would then go back after they prioritize their questions and decide on the 3 that are most important to ask. You can go back to the collaborate slide and they can put a heart on the question that they like the most. I'm going to put a heart here on that one. What is the sun made of? I love that question. And someone else did too. So this is turning out to be a priority question. How old is the sun is looking priority. So you can see then how students are deciding which questions are more important to answer. The next step after prioritizing questions is teacher and students plan their next steps for utilizing the questions. What will you use the research for? You probably know what you want them to do, but it's important to ask them because they might have ideas that you didn't even think of. And then step 6 for students reflect. This is a very important step that people might want to skip because they don't have time, but this is the metacognition step. This is where you're going to ask students, what did you learn from asking your own questions? How did you feel asking your own questions? And one of the ways that you can facilitate that in Nearpod is by, let me go back to student view. You can put a Flipgrid in here where they can record themselves giving a reflection on the question you put here. I asked the question, did you like asking questions in class today? How did it feel to ask your own questions? So as I said, Nearpod is one way that you can facilitate a QFT in a classroom, but there are easier ways to do it with different types of technology if Nearpod is not, you know, something that a teacher is comfortable with yet. So for example, in the presentation, on your own time, if you'd like to look at these templates, there's a template for a Google QFT where you just use a Google Doc. You could do this in a Microsoft Word document as well, shared on 365. So the students would just type into this document and brainstorm questions here, categorize questions here. Where was my Nearpod? Here it is. You can also do this with just a slideshow, a PowerPoint template on Zoom or on Google Meet or GoToMeeting or Teams, whatever you're utilizing in your district. And the template is here as well. If you decided to go into the presentation, there are templates there in the folder that you can utilize in your district. Here's an example of a Google Forms QFT, and it's great because it actually shows you an entire QFT that you go through yourself in Google Forms, and you can copy and change this template as long as you attribute it to writequestion.org. They give you the instructions. And lastly, there is a chart here from writequestion.org that has compiled a great list of technology that can be used to facilitate the QFT and the pros and cons of each type of technology. So just to let you know, and in my RBERN, we always make jokes about how I'm always advertising my workshops. So here's an advertisement. I'm running this workshop as a 2-part series starting on 10/6. It's 2 days, 10/6 and 10/13 from 3:30 to 5:30. Where we will actually go into the scaffolding techniques for various grades and proficiency levels. But I'm hoping that today you got a little taste of what virtual engagement can look like in a way that will promote higher order thinking for your students in your districts. And there's still room in these workshops. I just checked before coming here.
Thank you, Rachel. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, so let me stop my share because I want to make sure that my colleagues have time to share as well. And
while you are doing that, you got some great kudos from Jordan Gonzalez, who indicates you have wonderful workshops. So please, everyone, please do consider attending that event. Rachel, will you be able to send me a link that I can include in the minutes? So if people want to, they can?
Yes, absolutely. And there's a link in that presentation. If you clicked on that, that board where I showed when the presentation is happening, the link is there, but I'll also send it to you, the MLP link from our MLP.
Wonderful.
And really anyone from any region can come to the workshop. We definitely don't have an issue with that.
I just dropped our events calendar link in the chat too.
Thanks, Kathy. I appreciate that. Before we move over to Marcia, and Marcia, I've made you the host. Elisa is here with us. Elisa, did you want to say a quick hello to everybody?
I don't want to interrupt anything. Thank you for allowing me and giving me the moment. It's an amazing opportunity. And I think we can just go into further conversation at the end. I don't want to take any more time. These folks have done a diligent job in making sure they can give you a taste, as Rachel mentioned, as to the amazing work and support that they have. So thank you so much, Candace, and I look forward to speaking to you a little bit at the end.
Great. Okay, so Marcia, are you all set?
Candace, we have one other person in the waiting room. If someone can check and let them in.
Okay, Marcia, if you can have someone from your team, since you have that access and we don't, to that waiting room, we'd appreciate it. And we can see your screen.
She's muted.
She's muted, okay.
Yeah.
I always do that. I'm like talking to myself the entire time. I was like, hey, good afternoon. I said the whole thing. Sorry, I should wear a t-shirt. Am I muted? So hi, my name is Marcia Soares, and I am a resource specialist at the Capital District RBERN. And I am going to give you a little taste of the guided reading professional development that I have and how to adapt this to our English language learners and how to adapt it to hybrid or remote learning. So I am going to be using today Google. Well, Google, I did this presentation on Google Slide, but there's a Pear Deck add-on which allows you to easily make your slides interactive. Not as many options as Nearpod does, but it's simple. I think like the older students might be really into this because they can just write their answers. It's quick, and if you have a lot of content to teach, it's easy. If it's on Google Slides, just make the questions interactive. I will share this PD in our chat, and then but I would prefer you just looking at, actually I'll just show it at the end, and then I'll just go through it this way. Okay, so before we get started, we think about some English language. When you're thinking about ELLs and how you're going to teach guided reading, there's certain things that you have to be aware of. Obviously, like you have to, not in terms of the reading levels, but you also have to look at their language proficiency, and those two things have to match when you're thinking of your books and your objectives and what you're going to focus your guided reading group on. Consider carefully choosing text that meets the needs of students developing language proficiency and various cultural backgrounds. It's important to add on those cultural background pieces so they can make those connections to text with their own lives. Okay, with the activating background knowledge, that's huge. We don't know what background any of the students have, you know, so if you're talking about farms, have they ever been to a farm? If you're talking about a city, have they ever been in a city? So it's really important to build that background knowledge, access that prior knowledge, and then build upon it. Front loading essential vocabulary, using your images and definitions depending on your language proficiency levels, and always incorporating checks of understanding. Sorry. Also thinking about promoting metacognition during independent reading. Yeah, sorry. It's like, yeah, see, I'm still no. I always will be. I'm forever all. And I love what Rachel, her questioning techniques can really help with that. So I appreciate that. I'm definitely going to be adding that when I teach guided reading to teachers and how to do it. I wanted to also, in the slide, I put this, I'm not going to go into detail or go onto the website, but these are very, the Common Core progressions can be overwhelming. So they organized it here just by grade level bands. And you can look at, you know, what are the progressions of Common Core for our ELL students. Okay, so moving on to guided reading remotely. Thinking about your technical setup, it's important. So one important thing is we don't want to teach new technology and new content at the same simultaneously, because that is way too much. You know, think about if you're learning a new technology and then you have to learn some new content, that would be very overwhelming. So when you're experimenting with a new technology tool, it's important that you teach something that the students are comfortable with already, and it's more of them kind of using the platform and getting used to it and not really learning something. And then once you got that thing on hold and they can use it, then it's good to incorporate the content and new learning standards into that. It's important to use a gallery view because it kind of creates that student feeling, and I like that with Pear Deck because I can see my students and present it on the screen if I'm using Zoom. Just because we're remotely doesn't mean we don't have expectations and consistency. It's really important to set those online expectations. Like, how are they going to engage? You can't raise your hand. You know, in school, I always tell my kids, you have to raise your hand. You can't shout your answers, right? Crisscross applesauce. Yes, I taught K to 3, so these are the things that I say. And, you know, all these things, keep your hands and your feet to yourself. But now we have virtual rules and routines. So setting those rules and routines virtually, like, okay, how are you going to use the chat appropriately? It's not appropriate to use, you know, pictures that you're not supposed to and things like that. So setting up those guidelines are really important. Also, I think it's important that you set up your guided reading groups the same time every day. And you will see that Sandy is going to show you a HyperDoc link where the students can be like, okay, Tuesdays at this time, this is my guided reading group. I'm going to be prepared. If it's consistent, then the students will get used to that schedule and be more successful. When structuring your guided reading lesson is important. This is a lot, especially when you're doing virtual, to do an hour lesson. Like, you know, we would do like 30-minute lessons. You would chunk these up. Maybe you would do one day sight words, you reread, you do a vocabulary review. The next day, review some vocabulary, do a phonic mini lesson, access prior knowledge, then read the book. Then the third day, you work on comprehension and maybe a guided reading. So it's important that you break it up depending on your group and language proficiency level of your students. And finding good digital text could be challenging. Some schools have Reading A to Z. Some students, you know, it's Reworks and Newsela has great resources. Also, Epic has a great resources for kids to read books online. And you can use the books, and you'll see that I've used some. All right, so here's my sample lesson. So I pretended that I was doing a lesson. So one thing about Pear Deck is that I can make my slides interactive and I can also add audio, okay? So the students, when you have access to this, they can click on the audio and it would say it to them. So I'm gonna go here and I'm gonna show the responses. So what do you know about service dogs? I'm accessing prior knowledge. I'm gonna show you the student view. And as you see, they're just typing it in, and I put that question right on the slide, and then I just added this interactive question. They're smart, they help people every day. They can get things for you. So you see, you know, I have my students in this classroom are very smart in this group. So I'm gonna hide responses. And the audio included is just, if you're a student, you can hear what I said, and I just read the question out loud. So for those students who need questions to be read at them aloud, they can access it that way. Okay, another cool tool about Pear Deck is that students can draw or write in the actual slide. So building background knowledge, I embedded a video. I'm not gonna show you the video, but the video is there. And they would watch the video and then draw and write some examples of what service dog. So this is a Sesame Street video. It's very visual, very elementary, but this is an elementary book. So it provided a lot of background knowledge about what a dog is and what do they do and what are people with disabilities and things like that. So I'm gonna share some of the responses. They can help blind people cross the road, get a drink. They're cute. They are cute. They open doors. They're amazing. So you see that I can see. I can also, if I had the choice, go to the teacher, and I can also make it so I can see the students' names. Hold on, let me try to move this over, see if you can see it better. I can open a new window, dashboard. I can turn on student space so they can do it on their own. Right now I am controlling what they can see, but you can make this and make it an asynchronous activity where students can just read the slides, do it, answer the questions, and this all collects the data for you. So you will have that data. I'll show you that in a little bit, how the data gets collected too. That's pretty cool. Okay. So then I did a vocabulary and I wanted to make it interactive. And like I said, this is lower level. So I have handler, command, service dog. And I said, draw a line to match the vocabulary with the correct picture. So, you know, I put the spaces there. They have to connect the lines. So I'm going to show what that looks like. Different colors. Perfect. And if I scroll down, I can see everybody's work. Okay, and like I said, I can use it at the end and put their names on it as well. High responses. Okay, so also here I embedded a book. So you're gonna listen to the book and you can go back, and if you know, I click on the link, it should take, if you're a student with an account, it would just start, you know, reading it. So I'm not gonna show it to you, but it's a great, Epic is a great digital tool. Oops, I'm gonna admit somebody. And it reads it.
Yes, they are there.
So here's the book, and it's very interactive, right? And you can also use it to, and they can have it read to them. It's a great, so Epic has all these great books that you can use. I'm gonna go back here. So they'll read it. Maybe I do a multiple choice now. Name one thing that a service dog will learn during training. So maybe they read that book 2 times, listen 2 times, and then there's a multiple choice quiz that you can embed. And what's cool about this is that I can see if, you know, I can make I only put 1 multiple choice question. You can do more, and I can see, okay, look, they all got it. Okay, B, if I saw that they didn't get it, I can go back and see, okay, they didn't understand that book. So that's what I like about that feature. Okay, next I'm going to introduce Flipgrid. I love Flipgrid, especially for English language learners, because they're listening, they're reading, and their speaking skills from Flipgrid, and it's fun and it's easy to respond to it as a teacher, and also other students can respond to each other. And before the student can even publish their work, you get to approve it or not. So why do I like it? Multiple questions are possible. It has Immersive Reader. Immersive Reader is a great tool that reads the students, that can make the text bigger, smaller, and that can translate it in native languages. Teachers can provide video explanations. Students can respond to each other. So it's customizable built-in feedback tool, and integrates with many other apps. For example, if you saw Rachel, she integrated it in the Nearpod. In Pear Deck, I integrated it there, in Google Slides, and anything like that. And teacher can approve videos before they're posted. So I'm going to just show you an example of a Flipgrid. Okay, so I embedded it here. I attached a topic so the students can click on the topic. And of course, it's not working because text sometimes is not on your side. So I can also, if I had that problem, I can always go back to my original link and just post it and do it that way. So I can go to my Flipgrid here because things like that happen. Okay. Oh, nope, sorry. Oh, I must have put the link in wrong. I'm sorry about that. So they would be, I put the link of what dogs should do, and they would read that passage, and then after that, they could respond to the recording. So they call record respond, and they can record them. They would allow it here. Okay, I can import the video, mic help, it just helps you with that. I just want to show you the immersive reader. There's just right there. And this is what's great about it. It reads it to them, but I'm just showing you a translate version. Let's say I want to do, let's do Chinese, right? I can do just by word. So I can go to dog and then it reads dog.
Dogs.
There we go. And it also says in Chinese. Okay, it also does the whole document. So you can put your directions there. You can even type in a passage. I embedded a ReadWorks passage with it. And I don't know why I didn't link. I must have done that incorrectly, but oh, and I did check it. So and then you have your share, you can edit it, you can do some actions with it, you can record a response, submit a discovery. So there's a lot of different things that you can do with this, and that's why I like it so much. I'm gonna go back to the Pear Deck. Okay, and that's our information. So in the chat, I am going to put this presentation on here, but I am actually going to go to the actual here just to show you something. So this is my, if I go on here, let's say I wanted to add a question to this, it's really easy. I go to add-ons, I go to Pear Deck with Google, I open up Pear Deck. It will show up here. And then these are my options. So let's say I'm gonna add text and it just adds the question. Only thing, I have to actually type the question in the Google slide. So it's there, now it's interactive. I would just have to write the question in there. If I do multiple choice, it's the same concept. I would write the question and then the answers would be there. And if you want to do multiple questions, every slide would be a different question. Okay, let me just share this presentation with you. And then it's done. Change, copy link. Okay.
Marcia, are you going to put that in the chat so we can share it with everyone?
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Well, thank you. That's, you know, I taught for 21 years, but I'm learning new stuff today. This is really great. I've never used Pear Deck. I have used Flipgrid, but not Pear Deck or Epic. So thank you for doing that.
You're welcome.
Okay, our next presenter is Sandy. So I'm going to reclaim host and then I'm going to make Sandy our presenter. And then Sandy, just as a double check, we probably shouldn't have people at this point joining, but when you get that host, would you just double check the waiting room to see if anybody is there? All right, you should have control at this point.
Okay, hello everyone. And I did just check and there is no one in the waiting room. So my name is Sandy Strock and I am also a resource specialist with the Capital District RBERN. And I'm going to be kind of taking you from the front of the house to the back of the house. And so I have two resources to share with you today that are really about the teacher interaction opportunities, because one of the lessons that we learned in interacting with our teachers is that we cannot engage students who don't show up, and they often don't show up for reasons that we can control to a certain extent. And so I'm going to show you, I'm going to share my screen for just a moment, and I did put in the chat already. Whoop, get this bigger. I'm going to show you 3 different tools that we have developed which are useful for helping with the accessing of information. So the first tool is a schedule that is very visually heavy, and I'm just going to leave it in the creation mode for ease of access here. And so this is an example of a single day's schedule. And so what we had learned in the field is that sometimes the students' caregivers are not very fluent in English, and also the students can be overwhelmed by too many links, too many places to be and times to get there. And so this schedule was developed in conjunction with a teacher that was designed to help overcome that particular obstacle. So using a Control K, what you would do is you would link
the actual meeting link to the image that's associated with the class. And it might actually be the textbook that you're using rather than a globe or whatever. Then the Google Classroom is also a common link. And so we would want to make sure there was an easy access point for that as well. So perhaps labeling the Google Classroom link as the social studies label in this case. Not all of our work is obviously taking place synchronously because, as Assistant Commissioner Alvarez pointed out in the chat earlier, it's critically important that we make sure we're taking breaks from the online interactivity. And so some of those need to be brain breaks altogether, but other opportunities would be asynchronous lessoning. And so the asynchronous opportunity today is in our art class, and you'll notice that that's down below without a time, and classes that are not meeting today are just crossed out with a black bar. So this is very easy to manipulate as a teacher and provide your students with an accessible option. For more of a week at a glance, what you might do is create a grid schedule like this. And so now you have your labels over here and you would follow the same basic formatting. So I would take my live links and I would turn them into the labels and the icons on the side. I might take the actual meeting time, highlight that, and link it to my Zoom meeting link. And then if I have an activity that I'm doing in my Google Classroom, or if I have some worksheet or a thing that I have my students engaging with, a video they're watching, I could link that directly under the asynchronous as well. One of the other organizational templates that we have come across is the option to get students into different meetings and breakout rooms. So a lot of districts that we're working with are only using Google Meets, and Google Meet has yet to come out with their breakout room option. So this template allows teachers to have a lobby code, which is the main class, whole class instructional code. And then you can pre-establish different meeting links for breakout rooms and assign a student the opportunity to access a breakout room in advance. So you send this to each of the students and then they know how to click the live links and where they're supposed to go. You assign one student to be your timekeeper to make sure that they all get back where they're supposed to be when they're supposed to be there. So that's one of the documents that helps with some of the back-end planning. The second document that we created is actually based on an article that was posted in the ASCD magazine just a couple of weeks ago. And this particular image really caught our eye as something that addresses a need we've seen a lot in our districts. And so the idea of thinking through our actual building blocks of an online lesson, but it was missing some of the components we need in order to address the needs of our ELLs. And so we added some additional information to that. So let's take our direct instruction as an example. My building blocks objective is to transfer information via a lecture or mini lesson in order to explain a complex topic. So how might I go about doing that? What tools are at my disposal? So I might use Screencastify or QuickTime, and then I also might want to be able to upload that to a YouTube channel for the class. So you'll notice these icons on our HyperDoc are all live, and they will take you to tutorials or ways to sign up for this particular service. Going to the next level, of course, we want to be thinking about how we would scaffold that interaction for our students with English proficiency needs. And so one of the things that we might do is use the Zoom tool in Screencastify, not to be confused with the Zoom as a meeting engine. The Zoom tool allows you to focus in, and it literally enlarges a part of the screen in order to help draw students' attention to specific areas. You may also want to add closed captions or subtitles to your YouTube video. You can no longer, I just found out this morning, do that with other people's videos. So if you wanted to be able to add captions or subtitles, it would have to be your own video. A workaround for that, however, is the opportunity to use something called Google Transcription. And what Google has done is they've created a feature on their app where if you push the button that says transcription, it will type out in the language of your choice what is being said in real time. And you can even do that through your Google Meet. So it would translate what's happening in the Google Meet. All of these links are live and they take you to, again, tutorials or ways to access this scaffolding opportunity. And of course, then providing a written transcript in order to accompany a reading can be a great asset to your students. And so this document, we will not go into all of the components, but it walks you through the different building blocks of your lesson. So modeling, discussion, research and exploration, collaborative tasks, practice and review, assessment, and of course the metacognition component, all with different links to live online scaffolding opportunities for your students. So at this point, I am going to stop talking. I will share this link in the chat as well, and I will turn ownership over to Greg, who has our final component.
Host yet?
No, because I didn't have the host option. Looking for it. Candy, did you take it back?
I didn't, but what I'll do is I'll reclaim now.
Okay.
And we'll make Greg that. Okay, and Greg, make host. Okay, Greg, it should be all you.
Excellent, thank you. All right, so I'm going to post in the chat the link to today's presentation. It's only a presentation, it's more of an infographic. Some of you, if you're in a district and they have filters, you may not be able to open it at the district, but you can open it at home. But here's the link. It's to a Genially, and I'm not sure if anybody's used a Genially before, but I'm going to discuss a little bit about that. While I'm pulling this up, I just want to point out, so I'm the technology resource specialist at the Hudson Valley RBERN. And let me make sure I'm sharing the correct screen here. And let me just do the whole desktop. I'm realizing that's probably the safest thing to do, isn't it? Okay, there we go. So when you click on that link, you're going to be brought to a page that looks like this. And so what I did was, I offer 2 workshops. I offer the Technology Toolkit for Supporting ELLs workshop that has been running for a few years now. And between the 2 workshops, I offer probably around 120 technologies. And when the school year started, I realized that it's really important to highlight the best technologies that may be most helpful for you in your classrooms. And so I put together this infographic using Genially to do that. And so as you can see, so this is Genially first step. This is totally free for me to create this. You can create infographics, you can create data sets, you can create presentations. These can be very interactive, this infographic, if you'd like it to be. But what I want to point out is that when it loads, as you can see, it doesn't all load at once. It loads in pieces. And so you can draw attention to any specific point depending on what you want it to look like. So if you wanted to wait 45 seconds for this to appear up in the top right, you could do that to really draw the attention of students up there. So I broke it down between creating presentations, communication and translation, accessibility and interactivity. And as you can see, there's a pulsing to draw your eye down there. And when you hover over any of these technologies, you're going to be brought to a little pop-up that looks like this. And here's the link to the actual technology. Here's a short video of me demonstrating it or talking about it. And then there's a couple sentences down below that talk about how it can be applicable for students in your classroom. Now, this is still in progress. I still have to finish the interactivity section. I had a major jaw surgery a week and a half ago, so I'm still getting my speech back, so I can't quite talk that well. But it's made me slow down when I'm presenting, so it's been beneficial. So I just want to highlight a few specific pieces here. So after Genially, so if you want to work with K through 6, if you're working with K through 6 students and little ones, you're going to want to focus on technology such as like Toontastic to create cartoons to demonstrate learning. They can create a cartoon to depict the scene. It's totally free. It's an app. There's AR flashcards, which is a really incredible flashcard program. You print out the flashcards and students can hold the apps or their phone over it. And it will show an animal that goes along with that alphabet letter. You also have Quiver, of course. We've probably heard of Quiver. You color it in and students can make it come to life. But if you're working with more of a 7 through 12 group, you're going to be focusing on Quill. If anybody's used Quill before, it's great for teaching grammar. It's a really effective way for students to learn. They take an assessment, and the Quill technology figures out where their highest need is for where they're for grammar usage, and then it'll custom tailor a lesson for them to help them with that grammar. There's also things like Lyrics Gap, especially for the older ones, 7 through 12. They love this stuff. It's basically you have to listen to music and you have to type the lyrics of the music as you hear it, or you have to do a fill in the blank of the lyrics as you hear it. And it's a great way for students to practice their language skills and still have fun while listening to music. So with that said, I also want to point out quickly, I mean, we've all heard of News ELA. I know that they put the pay thing on, a lot of districts have purchased. However, if you haven't checked out Common Lit, it's down here. It's very similar to News ELA, but it's focused basically on literature, and they have all the scaffolds of News ELA, and they're totally free, and it's growing rapidly, and they have translation features and everything. So check out Common Lit when you get a chance. But I want to specifically point out a technology that a lot of people probably haven't used. It's called Kaizena. It's this one right here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up, this is a Google Doc. Can you see the Google Doc right here? I have a sentence type that's poorly typed. Okay, good. So Kaizena is an add-on for Google Docs. It can also be used in Microsoft, and it could just be used as PDFs if you wanted to upload it to the website. But in this case, I'm using it in Google Docs. And what you'll do is you'll go up to add-ons and you go to get add-ons, and that'll bring you to the Chrome Web Store. And from there, you can search multiple add-ons for Google Docs that help increase productivity and learning for students and for you. I have Kaizena already installed, and I'm going to open it. And you'll see on the right side, once it loads, it's going to open up a toolbar that has all the different features housed inside for Kaizena. Now, once it loads, you'll see that how this works is that as a student, think about you submit an assignment. I share the link to you as the teacher, a Google Doc. You have Kaizena installed, and the students have it installed. When you review the assignment that they submitted, you can highlight text, so you can see the dog run. So that's not correct. That's Grammarly, of course, but that's not correct. So I want to make a point here. I can record a voice message of me explaining to the students you didn't use the correct tense of the verb, and then you can stop and post. And so that will be available to the student to listen to as they're looking at their Google Doc. Now it gets even better. You can also do a skill where I can actually enter in, I can create skills, and it's basically a type of rubric where I can give the student a level 0 to 4 based on how well they're using, in this case, their voice. So here, this level 0 is you're varying the use of active and passive depending on the purpose, all the way up to 4, which is you're using active and passive voice together seamlessly. And you can create these skills entirely as you want to, and there's also an entire catalog of available skills for you to access already in Kaizena. For lesson, this is great. I can actually go here and I can actually choose a lesson. So in this case, I could do, well, you know, let's do this. Didn't. So didn't, that's not very formal in many ways. So you would want that do not. So you can just say avoid contractions. And if I hit select, now it shows me as the teacher assigning to the student a mini lesson to be able to teach them to avoid contractions in their writing. So this is active teaching that's totally passive on your end. You're still helping students and they're still being engaged by you teaching them, but the technology is doing the work for you. And finally, of course, there's text messages that you can always just write a text message to the student and you can talk back and forth. And granted, you could use comments for this, but you're not going to be getting the interactivity and the skill and lesson feature that Kaizena offers. So that's Kaizena. They have a totally free account if you'd like to use it. There's a paid account, of course, that gives you some extras, but Kaizena free will do everything for you. But before I wrap up, I just want to point out up at the top, one, this graphic is constantly changing, but I want to point this out. First of all, we talked about a lot of technologies today. Make sure that your district is okay with using these technologies under Ed Law 2D in Part 121. Speak with your technology director and they can help you with that. Also, don't over-tech yourself and don't over-tech your students. You don't have to do 50 technologies. Just choose 1, 2, or 3 that you really, really enjoy and focus on those. And I read an article about how before the pandemic, we were all trying to keep our kids, I don't have kids, but I know we're trying to keep kids off of their screens. That we're trying to put down your cell phone and go to bed. Now we're asking students to be on their screens all day and they still want to be on their screens in the evening. So now we have students being in front of a computer on a device for 12 to 16, 18 hours a day. And so when it comes to technology, you really have to ask yourself, does this technology engage my students in active learning? And more importantly, does it improve my students' learning experience? And finally, this is very important too. You have to ask yourself, is it worth it for me and is it fun for me to use? Because if it's not fun for you to use, it's going to become a burden, and I would just cut it out. Choose something else that's fun for you and make sure that you enjoy doing this, because things can become very difficult on your end. But keep in mind that we're really trying to help students and choose very creative technologies and not just show them spreadsheets of all these different things, the technologies that you can use in the classroom. And so this infographic is here for you. If you have any questions, you can always contact me at gbilly@swboces.org. And I'll hand it back to Candy. If there's any questions, just post them in the chat or you can email me as well.
Thanks, Greg. I really appreciate that.
You're welcome.
This is just chock full of wonderful, wonderful ideas on all the kinds of things that we can do. So what I'm going to do is, let me just share my screen here for just one moment. There we go, and we'll go back to PowerPoint. Okay, Elisa, I'm going to turn it over to you if you'd like to address the group.
Thank you so much. Well, first and foremost, I just wanted to say thank you to all of our colleagues and our specialists that presented today. Greg, Marcia, Sandy, Rachel, Kathleen, thank you for being on the call. I know we have some additional RBERN specialists on the call from throughout the state of New York. Thank you for being here. It's important that you're here and to hear the needs of our colleagues in the field. To those of you in the field, this was just a taste. And as a reminder, what we've decided to do is that we have 2 sessions a month. The first session is directly to address business items, issues of compliance, of concerns throughout the state of New York for your children. As we field the questions, we'll be able to respond to you in that fashion and support you. The second item is in hopes of helping to build capacity. So we give you a little preview, but just so that you can help fall in love and identify the areas where you need support. And therefore you can invite all of your teachers, lead teachers, your L teachers, but all teachers, right? This is an opportunity where you can also invite your teachers in other content as content area specialists to start understanding the needs of our children and being able to support them as they create this. A lot of chat information on this website. Most importantly, everything that you see has been created. It exists on the website that we have shared with you. Kathleen added it onto the chat. There is a web link called RBERN On Demand. It has plenty of webinars and PowerPoints that were pre-recorded for you. Some of them even allow your teachers to receive CTLE credits. And that's the goal. They don't have enough time. We want to make things as best as we can for them so that we can accommodate their schedule. Most importantly is, to Greg's point, we have to be cognizant of the fact that we don't want to use technology or overload it for the sake simply to say that we're using it. It must be relevant. It must be purposeful. It must be intentional, strategic for our children. Remember also that it's easiest if you are able to create a team of teachers that gather, collaborate together, co-teach, bring them virtually together and expose them to all of these resources so they can make the final decision. Finally, I would say it's important that at this moment in time, we help continue to build our children becoming independent thinkers, being able to navigate and advocate for themselves. Language, language, language. There is no excuse, as difficult as our world is right now. You are the force and the catalyst to ensure that every other person in our educational system provides items that are worthy and work that are worthy of our children. Yeah. And so for that, I just want to say thank you and turn it over. If anybody has any questions or final thoughts they just wish to add, and I will make myself, I'm not leaving anywhere, just in case anyone would like to take advantage and chat with me afterwards. But I would like to open it up to the group.